Hi guys, welcome to the Cabby Workshop. My name is Leon and in this video I'm going to show you how I turn this solid oak wooden flooring into this beautiful desk for the talented Sew It By Steph. Stick around. Okay, so the first thing that I need to do is this wooden flooring needs to be run through my thickness planer. Okay, so I'm working with some solid oak wooden flooring to create this desk. The flooring itself actually comes with these grooves on the bottom. So my first job, I need to remove them grooves so that I can get a flat gluing surface. I need to glue two of these boards together to get the thickness of the desk. So obviously I need a flat gluing surface to allow that to happen. The joys of working in a small shop. Okay, so this is my first project that I've ever done, guys. So you're going to see a lot of mistakes happen. This is the second mistake that I have in the workshop, second accident, shall we say. There you have it. So there's a lot of mistakes, guys. This is the first build that I've done. A lot of these tools that I'm using in this build I've never used before. This is a big learning process for me. I'm really happy with the way it turned out in the end. You have to stick around to see how it turns out at the end. I couldn't be happier with it in the end, but there is a lot of mistakes that I made. This is a learning process, so bear with me. So now that I've planed all the boards, and now we're up to the glue stage of the build. And as I said, I'm gluing two of the boards together to get the final thickness of the desk. This isn't the actual final thickness of the desk. I haven't planed both sides of this board to make sure that there's no warps or twists or anything. I thought my best bet would be to glue them together first of all, and then get them to the final thickness. I thought that would probably be my best bet to avoid any cups and warps and twists and bows that wood might already have, and would allow me to keep as much thickness as I possibly could. What I realised is I don't have enough clamps and I don't have enough glue. So I've definitely used too much glue on this one. As you can see, it is now there, clamped up. But I need more clamps and I need more glue. So I'm going to go and get some clamps, some more glue, and I will be back soon. Okay, I promise I won't say clamps and glue again in this video. But anyway, now that all the boards are glued up, I'm just trimming off the edges, getting them to the final length. And to do that, I use my miter saw, my compound miter saw. And as you can see with this one, some of the boards are a lot longer than the others. None of these two boards were the same length in the box. They was all different lengths. They were all solid pieces of wood. And they was flooring pieces, so they do come in different lengths. Now I'm just laying out the boards here to establish if I have enough boards planed and glued, how much more wood I need, to get an idea of the orientation of the wood that I want, the grain, and do I want any knots or voids to be on show, or do I want them to be on the bottom, that kind of thing. I'm just arranging them now and just deciding all this now in my head. Right, now I've decided which way I want the boards to lie in the table. It's time for the first section of the main glue up. And what I decided to do was to glue the length of the boards first. And to do this, I used dowels for alignment to make sure that the boards were perfectly aligned. I used some clamps, as you can see, to make sure that the boards was all in a perfectly aligned. And the dowels, what I used was just some general dowels. I can't remember the size of the drill bit I used, but I used these self-centering dowel pins, and that allowed me to then imprint where the holes on the opposite piece of wood needed to be drilled to allow for perfect alignment. Highly recommend. They cost a couple of pounds from Amazon, and they're really good for this type of job. So once I'd got all the dowel holes drilled and the dowels put in and aligned, I use the clamps, the vise on my bench itself. I have these dogleg vise. Forget the actual terminology for it, but you understand what I'm saying. The problem that I had with that is I had to do each length individually, which took a long time. So now that I've got all the boards glued up lengthwise, I'm running them through the planer to get them to the final thickness, which is what I'm doing here. Several passes through the thicknesser to get them all the boards to the final thickness. And this removes any sort of warps, cups or anything that they may have had in the boards previously. I mean, I was quite fortunate. None of these boards really did have any significant warps or cups or bows or anything like that, but... Right, so now I'm at the final glue up stage. And again, I'm using dowels for alignment. And I've got a little jig that allows me to get perfect center alignment of these dowels. I highly recommend a jig like this. It does make the job much easier. Okay, so I've got all the dowel holes all drilled and all lined up. Now I need to get the clamps set up, get it glued and get it clamped up. But first, it's time for some din-dins. Okay, so now that I'm back from my dinner, I decided to start with the final glue up. Now this was a very time sensitive part of the build. I really needed to get through this quick. I didn't want the glue to go off. It was very warm at the time. And I allowed Grabby to do some of the work for me by stacking the boards on top of one another. And knocked them down with a mallet. And then finally pushed them together with the clamps. The clamps that I used in this build are, I have 4 pipe clamps which I used, and the rest was all F clamps. I believe they're F style clamps. And I think I used probably 12 clamps in total. Not far off 12 clamps. I think we'll see now anyway how many clamps I did actually use. Now, as I said, this is my first build, and a lot of these things I've never done before. And gluing a desk together like this, I had never done this before. And I made a mistake in this part of the build. And the mistake that I made was putting far too much pressure on the clamps and not having anything to push down on the wood to keep it perfectly pushed against the base clamps, the clamps at the bottom, which was the pipe clamps, to avoid any cupping or bowing that might happen from over clamping. And I did get a bit of a bow in the table, which is not a problem in the end, but it really frustrated me at the time that I made that mistake. But like I say, this is a learning process for me, so these are mistakes that I had to make, and thank God I made it on a table that was to be used in my own home and not somebody else's home. So all these mistakes that I do make will be addressed in the next build, and I hopefully won't make them again. Now, another mistake that I did make was not cleaning up the glue before this part. And I wish I did, because cleaning up the glue, as you see me do like there, was a very hard work. Yeah. Yeah. So now I'm just deciding how I want the river to lie on the table. So I'm doing this by freehand, and that is Stephanie. This is the desk who I'm making it for. That's my partner, and that's my daughter there. So once I had free-handed the river, I decided to cut it out using my router bit with I believe a straight cut bit. Sorry if my terminal is wrong. I probably should have double checked what bit I used before getting to this part, but I think you guys, if you're familiar with woodworking, you'll know exactly what bit I used. And I'm just making sure that I can see the lines, because the lines was very fake. But anyway, I'm really liking how it's coming on. I went a bit wide on this mouth here, but I actually like that because I like the way it opens up. Because rivers open up, don't they, when they meet estuaries? And that almost looks like an estuary the way it opens up. And this bit here could be the sea. Use your imagination, you know? A sea of mess. There was a lot of mess in the shot then. I apologise, but anyway, so I wanted to add more than just the river in the middle. I wanted to add a corner section, and that's what I'm doing there. Okay, so it's time now to cut the length of the table. To do that, I'm going to use this Festool track saw. My main intention with this cut is to make sure that it's a perfect 90 degree to the side of this table here. So to do that, I've got my trusty square. Now, it would be a lot better if I had a much bigger square, but this is what I've got, and this is what I'm going to use. Just check square. We are square here, all square here, and all square here. So my original plan was to have this around 5 foot, 60 inches. So I think I want to stick to that. I want to stick to the 60 inches, which is going to put me right around here, about here. It's going to put me right here. So if I do the same again on the other side. Okay, so I only show you myself doing one pass with the track saw, but I actually did it in 3 passes. I wanted to make sure that the cut was accurate. And the main body of the river this is where I inlay the crayons. Now this is the second time that I actually did this, and it turned out much better the second time. The first time I used a heat gun, it was very messy. The crayons splashed everywhere, they didn't flow the way I wanted them to flow, so I started again, and this is how I decided to do it on the second attempt. And what I decided was to get a heat source and place that heat source directly above the crayons and then let gravity do the rest of the work. So what I ended up with was a much more natural flow of the colours, the way that they flow into one another. It just looked so much better doing it this way, and I could not be happier with the result. So once I'd finished melting the crayons inside, I filled it then with epoxy. And this is I just included the epoxy pour because I know people tend to like the epoxy pours, tend to like seeing them. And what I noticed at this part of the build is, previous to putting the epoxy in, the crayons, they did look rather dull. You can't really see it from the camera here, but as soon as the epoxy went in, them colours, they really popped and they really came to life. Really happy with how the colours looked. I could not be happier with this. So it's now time to take off this epoxy. To do that, I've got myself a new hand planer. I've tried different ways. I tried with the chisel. Don't do it with the chisel. Yeah, so I've got a new planer, electric planer. Let's see how I get on with this. If this doesn't work, then I don't know what I'm going to do. But yeah, let's give it a try. Never used one of these before, so let's see how I get on. Okay, so I decided to use this electric planer to take off the epoxy. It definitely wasn't the right tool for the job. I definitely do not recommend doing it with this sort of tool. What you get with a tool like this is you get a lot of chip out in the epoxy, which I'm going to show you in a minute. It started off okay, and it looked okay to me. It was taking off and it was nice and smooth underneath. But the more I used it, I don't know if the blade got duller, the more I used it, and it started to cause some really bad chip out in the epoxy. So this is what I'm starting to notice, the chip out that it's causing. Okay, so we're getting some really bad chip out, and I'm not quite sure how to fix that. So maybe I'm gonna go away and yeah, I don't really know what to do about that, because that's so significant that I think if that's not gone down deeper than where it needs to go, then I'll be lucky, because I really think it probably has. I'm not quite sure how to fix that. Okay guys, I'm breaking the fucking joint. Excuse my French. Right, so I'm going to go away, I'm going to go to the local hardware store, I'm going to get myself a belt sander. I'm going to get myself a corded belt sander, because I don't want to mess about with batteries. The planer has actually run out of batteries, but it's giving me such significant tear out that I don't think it's the tool for the job. I'm not really quite sure what I've got it for, but I've got it in case I need it for another job. Anyway, so I'm going to go and get a belt sander, and I'm going to see if that helps removing more of the surface epoxy. Okay, so I'm back with the belt sander. I'm just giving it a clean because I had previously used it before starting the recording. I started to use it without recording, but this is my first introduction to the joys of using a belt sander, and you're going to see. Yep, so I know now when you're using a belt sander you need to keep hold of it with two hands to stop that from happening, because if you hold it with one hand and you press the trigger, it's going to run away from you and you're going to get accidents and bad things are going to happen. But anyway, once I started to remove the epoxy with the belt sander, I realised it was a much better tool for the job, and I couldn't be happier with how it turned out in the end. Like I say, it removed the epoxy no problem at all. Once I had finished removing all that surface epoxy and I got it down to the right level, so it was in line with the wood, I then went on to use my orbital sander, and I sanded the top of the table up to 320 grit, and the base of the table I think I sanded to 180. I didn't need to go as high as 320, so I went to 180 on the bottom and 320 on the top. And then to get rid of the sharp edges, I gave it, I believe it was a 1/4 inch round over bit. I'm not 100% sure. Like I say, I am new to this, so I don't really know. I know what the tools do. I don't know what size of tool I used. I can't remember. But I used a round over bit to get a nice rounded edge on the desk. And it looks really good in the end. It looks really, really good. Really professional look in the end. And then once I give it the round over, you can sort of see the round over in this shot, but after I give it the round over, then it was on to sanding the epoxy. Now I wanted a glass-like finish on the epoxy, as close to glass-like as I could possibly get it. Now when I actually mixed up the epoxy, I do have a vacuum chamber to get rid of most of the bubbles. Now it doesn't get rid of 100% of the bubbles, but it does do a fantastic job, so I highly recommend using one of them if you're using epoxy. And then I had to sand it up to 3000 grit, and I think I sanded up to 1000 grit, and then I wet sanded them from 1000 to 3000. Okay, so now I'm up to the part where I put in the finish on the table, and the finish that I decided to use was Oldie's oil. Now the thing with Oldie's oil is it does cause a little bit of yellowing to the table, which is standard, you know, most finishes do, and I wanted to negate that and avoid that as much as I could. So I decided to go with Creative Colours titanium white pigment mixed in with the Oldie's oil. And that allowed me to keep more of the natural colour of the wood, as opposed to any yellowing that may have dulled the surface and took away from the colours. I really wanted the colours to stand out and pop. So to keep the wood more in its natural looking state is what I wanted to achieve, and this really helped me do that. Okay, so the final section here is me attaching the legs, and the legs that I used are some smart legs from a company called Madesite. I went with the dual motor version, and this is for Stephanie's benefit because she likes to sew. She's a sewer. She creates the most beautiful vintage dresses for little girls. Go and check her out. I'll leave all the links in the description. Please go and check her out and give her a follow. It'll be much appreciated by the both of us. And the reason we chose these smart desks is because you can lift them up and down, and she can, when she's sat down sewing at the desk, she can have the desk nice and low, and then when she's cutting out her pattern pieces, she can lift the desk up, so she doesn't have to bend over and avoid giving any damage, long-lasting damage to her back. So, time for the big reveal. I want to thank anybody who's managed to watch this video all the way to the end. It's now time to see the desk in its full final glory. And if you've liked what you've seen, please leave a like, please leave a comment if you have any tips. And last of all, don't forget to go and follow Sew It By Steph on all of the socials, the links in the description. Thanks again for watching, guys, and we will see you in the next video. Bye for now.